They have had 24 top 40 singles in the UK, 5 number 1 albums. They've sold over 60 million albums worldwide, and they were the most commercially successful Scottish band of the 80s.
Yeah, yeah, sounds like it. Those numbers will get it done.
Yeah, and he married Patsy Kensit. Yeah, so there you go. Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of That's Audiophiles. My name's John. His name is Andy.
It is.
She packed my bags last night pre-flight, 0 hour, 9 a.m. And I'm going to be high as a kite by then. More on that later. So because it's Friday, yes, it is. We are going to listen to a wonderful track recommended by one of our wonderful viewers. In this case, the viewer is Rob, and he dropped a comment on the magazine Motorcade episode and suggested a band that we've already listened to. I had to check that. It was like 2 years ago, but we did listen to, and that is Simple Minds.
Okay.
Now, I am familiar with this song anyway, so Andy's going to listen to it. The song is I Travel. I remember you quite enjoyed the previous 2 years ago track from Simple Minds. You can
Yeah, it
remember
was
back
just
that
nice
far?
to it was just nice to hear anything from them that wasn't, don't you forget it, because that's all I really knew going into that. So it was like I had to diversify my Simple Minds portfolio a little bit. So I'm glad Rob's giving me another chance to do just that here as well with this one. So you said the name of the track. I'm sure it's written down or typed out on our spreadsheet or whatever, but it was called I Travel. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
Gotcha.
And that is just the single pronoun, not as in the affected Apple marketing tool.
Yes, I was thinking I travel, I steps, I health, all this stuff.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, they're in the
So,
travel planning business now too. Jesus, Tim Cook.
yeah. Anyway, you go off, have a listen, come back and tell Rob, myself, and all the other good folks what you think.
I will do. Oh my God, this right now sounds exactly or almost exactly like this song "Keel Timing" by Manchester Orchestra. One of the more recent tracks. Yeah, that's incredible actually. How much they sound alike there. If unless my memory is totally playing games with me, but I've heard that song recently, and it sounds a lot like this. All right, let's relive that and let it play through. This. All right, let me stop right there because it sounds like it's transitioning into like a pre-chorus or a chorus or something there. So yeah, really Interesting. I'm still not over the fact that this reminds me so much of the song that I'm familiar with, but I will work through it. Uh, yeah, it's really interesting sort of digital chicanery going on here. All kinds of different sounds that kind of give it this forward progress, but also kind of this unease, kind of with all the frenetic movement as well. So that's really interesting. And there are these interesting allusions in some of the lyrics as well. I think there's, cities, buildings, or some sort of homes falling down, and then something about pictures on the wall and of leaders standing tall. And there's also lines. I think he said something about an assassin in a hit and run, and then I think that was a reference to Asia stealing a newborn son. I'm not 100% sure. Newborn sons aren't the first thing I think of when I think of parts of Asia. It's the daughters, but that's a whole nother can of worms. But yeah, interesting stuff so far. Let's see where this. Let's take it back a little bit and let it play through that pre-chorus. Okay. Evacuees, refugees, presidents, and kids. Sort of opens up, it's a little lighter. Ooh. That warbly, bendy guitar. Bass. These claps, they're like industrial sounding. Rolling bass underneath all this has been great. Yeah, this was a really interesting song. I really the lyrics I didn't catch all of, but from what I could catch, I found it to be really interesting, and it felt like they were making a statement. The music was also really cool too because you had like obviously there's some electronic synthy stuff happening, but there's interesting use of guitar and just the sound and the because they wanted to match that aforementioned electronic-y synthy stuff. So the tone that the guitar takes on is interesting because it's kind of like fitting the motif of the song, and that rolling bass underneath is really great as well. Those use of the hand claps I really enjoyed. I thought it was kind of an interesting addition, and they also gave them sort of this almost mechanical or industrial kind of sound that I thought lent itself really well to the overall sound that they're going for with this tune. Now, the lyrics that I caught sounded like very observational and kind of like what the band saw throughout Europe. I mean, it sounds like it's kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly. You got parks and museums, and restaurants and sort of like the typical things one takes in when they're in a new or different place. But also like refugees and decadence and dilapidated houses and stuff like that. So this interesting juxtaposition of like class disparity, and all those things that can build unease or tensions between peoples and sometimes between countries. And I'm thinking about the Cold War in Europe, and he says Central Europe. Draw a line down it. Fuck, build a wall in Berlin, and you that's your line of demarcation. There's the crux of sort of the geographic linchpin point of the Cold War. So it sounds very observational. I love how he brought back that line, which I thought was really interesting the first time I heard it, and I didn't assume I would hear it again, but it makes sense that they would reference it again when it's like Europe has a language problem. In Central Europe, men are marching, which I think is a direct allusion to all that stuff I just talked about with the Cold War and all that stuff. So, yeah, it seems like a lack of unity amongst the European nations is kind of, at this point in history, is kind of what they're talking about. Or maybe the lack of unity between groups. I don't want to act like all of them were, at odds. But yeah, it was an interesting time. Things are pretty interesting now too, unfortunately. But yeah, I will say like the tension and the feel of the music, this uneasiness and this frenetic energy, I think does a really good job of illustrating the literal feelings of those during this period of time. So they're kind of like the music matches the sentiment and even the historical era that's being illustrated here. If I'm right, I mean, I could totally fuck it off my nut here and have no idea what I'm talking about. But that's the vibe I'm getting, and that's sort of like with the lyrics that I was able to catch, coupled with the feel of the music and how they like. Maybe it's a happy accident that they juxtapose so well with one another, or maybe, and more likely, perhaps it was intentional. And if it was, then that's a great. They pulled that off really well, I should say. And on top of that, it reminded me of a Manchester Orchestra song, which it's a good way to butter me up. To be fair, I'm sure Manchester heard this song and was like, "Yeah, we want to get in on a little bit of that sound. We're looking for this." Or maybe it was a happy accident. Regardless, I really enjoyed giving this a listen. I kind of liked the geopolitical allusions made throughout. Yeah, I'd like to get like John to confirm that for me. But this is a great shout. I had a lot of fun listening to it, and I'm looking forward to learning some more. So let's head back to the man himself.
Simple Batty, he's back. So you've had a listen to I Travel by Simple Minds. What do you think?
This is another interesting listen, and another one where I'm like, man, these guys, their sound was not at all. You never should judge a book by a cover or a band by one song, I guess is the lesson here, right? Because this is not at all what I had expected, and it was actually a lot of fun to listen to. For different reasons. But both those different reasons end up complementing each other. And I think at this point, I might as well just come out and say it's the music. Obviously, is a very interesting facet of the song, but so are the lyrics that I could catch because sometimes they were a little hard to extrapolate from all the digital, fun that was happening here and all the sounds that were occurring. But and just I think maybe it's the accent divide or what have you, or just how it was mixed. But I did pick up enough to paint a pretty interesting picture that when juxtaposed to the music, you realize how kind of hand in hand the moods of both go in this track. So the song begins, and right out of the gate, I have like several thoughts that hit me over the first like 10 seconds of this song. The first is, God, this would be an awesome soundtrack to a light show because just instantly, like, because the sounds are shooting like lights across, the soundscape. So all I could think of is, man, this would be in the 80s, this would be fucking cool with some neon lights flying around. So there's like this a little bit more of like an elongated one. And then there are also these super pulsy ones. Ones being these digital sounds. And so some more resonant, some darting, and they all mix together to create quite an interesting sound. And then as it kind of takes form, I realize, holy shit, this sounds very similar to a Manchester Orchestra song called Keel Timing, where they tap into a very similar sound. I think the instrumentation might be a little bit differently. I think the guitar in Manchester might be a little bit more pronounced or less mixed and sort of homogenized with all the rest of the sounds like they have here. But they're cousins, and I think I'm now quite certain that like Andy Hall and Robert McDowell had to have been listening to Simple Minds when they were writing that album, whether it was overt or subconscious, whatever. It just made me smile, and I had to mention it.
It's it's cool then to find that out about a band and a song you like. That this is one of the influences. That's
Yeah,
it's really
yeah,
nice to
absolutely.
discover that.
Especially when it's one you didn't see coming. Like I know all the usual suspects when it comes to bands I like's influences, but here's one that I didn't have on my radar or in my bingo card. But I think it's undeniable, and it kind of I think it makes sense too, and yeah, it is a really cool experience when you're able to kind of like connect dots you didn't really even know existed. Um, so the this digital stuff kind of like abruptly stops for a split second, and then the beat drops. And now we're in the midst of what sounds like digital electronic EDM music mixed with industrial kind of a sound as well, with also just shades of like you catch some drums in there and you're or the beat in there, but you're also catching this really nice rolling bass that's happening underneath of all of that as well. um so while in the throes of this digital chicanery, a rather emphatic voice emerges and begins to deliver the lyrics, of which I only catch bits and pieces as mentioned. He sings of cities, buildings, and some sort of homes falling down. I don't know what adjective he used to describe them, or even if it was an adjective, but there was a word that preceded homes that I don't think I caught. Um, this is followed by a reference to pictures on the wall, and something about leaders standing tall. There are also lines about. Go ahead.
Just while you're doing that, and I didn't break this down, but I just like obviously I've got it in front of me. Pictures on the wall. It's an Echo and the Burning Man song. Um,
Oh,
yeah,
so
and
do you think they were talking about literal pictures on a wall, or do you think it was
yeah,
just
yeah,
a
but they're semi-referencing another band.
okay, okay. They're killing
Yeah,
two birds with one stone
yeah,
here.
and there's other stuff in there I think which references other things as well. But
Well,
yeah,
damn,
go
no,
on.
I
Sorry.
really wish I had like honed in on more of the lyrics from that perspective rather than trying to paint this picture that I thought I was picking up on as the song was
He
progressing. But
meant
here,
he mentions another artist as well.
oh, okay, all right. Um,
You'll find that out later.
okay. So there are also lines about assassins in a hit and run, and I think a reference to Asia, but pronounced Asia or something. I think that's what it was. And you're going to tell me that's the correct way you pronounce it. But yeah, not the way I'm used to hearing it. So that made me question whether it was in fact Asia. But yes, stealing a newborn son, which I thought was weird because when I think about babies and Asia, and I know it's not fair because it's an entire goddamn continent, but perhaps the most notorious player in that continent, I think of the girls being born and like the whole one child rule and all of this stuff that was going on. So that was where my mind went. So I thought it was curious when he said stealing a newborn son. Then he mentions evacuees and refugees, presidents and monarchies. The usual suspects. The song shifts down a bit after those lines into perhaps a pre-chorus thing. It kind of like opens up a little bit. Um, and during the segue, and then he mentioned something about decadence and pleasure towns. Lists some of the things I assume he has encountered in such places or seen, which are like tragedies, luxuries, statues, parks, and galleries. Um, I was really on a roll when it came to catching the lyrics during that bit. He repeats the bit about traveling around and again mentions the decadence and pleasure towns. But the beat cuts out, similar to how it did very early on in the song, around the 132 with some of this resonant synth sound left in its wake as the sole occupant of the soundscape. Super short-lived. As the beat hits again and we're back off and running at this frenetically manic pace from the previous verse. And during this bit, before the lyrics proper join, I notice again these eerie kind of sounds akin to digital warbly and resonant notes. I thought was kind of interesting and kind of like it's a little unsettling, so it only further kind of enhances this unease in the whole soundscape that they've constructed here. Nothing is fixed and everything is moving around and kind of eerie sounding and nothing seems concrete or foundational, and that had that I guess for me enhances this feeling of unease or unsuredness. um so I thought that that was interesting, and I'm trying to like connect that mood that I'm getting from the music with some of the words and the mood that they're trying to drum up via the lyrics. So that is starting to connect in my head as we're 2/3 of the way through the song or whatever. The singer mentions a European language problem. Talking on. He alludes to men marching in Central Europe, and there's something happening in restaurants and airports, but I couldn't make out what exactly those things were, but they sounded like interesting landmarks that he cited for a reason. Um, those lyrics are really interesting to me. The your European language problem, because it's so it like there are so many different languages and dialects in what, comparatively speaking, is a rather small continent when you're comparing it to some of the others. Um, and I mean, look at Europe is it's small compared to the entirety of North America. Yet North America has like maybe four languages in French, Spanish, English. Really those are that's about it. Really, those three. Really, I mean, there's probably other ones, but that are spoken but aren't as prevalent. Whereas Europe has all these rich old languages, many of all of the ones we speak here are from which are derived from Europe. So it's just really interesting to hear this language problem when it's almost like I look at Europe as one of the birthplaces of like the proliferation of languages, because the whole diaspora moving up into Europe and then spreading off and creating their own and all that is just very interesting to me. So that I kind of latched on to that lyric. Another pre-chorus downshift follows this bit, and the lyrics repeat from the previous iteration of this portion. Ditto for that sort of. I don't know if it's a pre-chorus and a chorus or just a chorus with kind of two separate parts, but it's the same cut and paste lyrically from the first instance to all subsequent instances. Um, and then again, this is followed by a bit of that, like one of those pregnant pauses. But this time, when things kick off after the pause, we get treated to some again warbly and bendy guitar work for a few seconds before another chorus. This time followed by a similar cutout and rejoin. Um, from the first time through. And for whatever reason that like I know this appeared earlier, but now the hand clapping is really or whatever that I don't know if it's a facsimile of hand clapping, but just that, and it's so incessant and pronounced that it again sounds industrial to me, almost like it's like a mechanical type sound. I thought that was kind of interesting too. For whatever reason, it stood out to me during this part. It sounded extra pronounced. Then the singer delivers the same lines from earlier, and perhaps they are the lyrics that stood out to me the most when I heard them the first time about like Europe has a language problem in Central Europe, men are marching. Um, and then the music continues on for a few more seconds until it kind of fades out, and it seems clear that the song touches on things that the band witnessed. Um, and I assume it was probably while they were touring, I mean, going through Europe or whatever. So those things appear to be interesting juxtapositions to one another, like the idea of taking in restaurants, statues, galleries, and museums and parks, like all the things that, like, tourists do. Um, while also witnessing things like tragedies and different lands and forms of government, whether they're monarchies or presidencies or, prime minister, whatever, you know what I mean? That sort of a monarchy to a proper whatever form of democracy that you guys have installed in whatever these countries are that he's visiting. But decadence and pleasure towns, and then also refugees. So it sounds like the good, the bad, and the ugly that he witnessed while going through these places. And meanwhile, he calls out specifically Central Europe, which to me sounds like another way of saying the dividing line between East and West, which is essentially what a central locale is. And I'm thinking, well, this has got to be like the early 80s or something like that. The effects of the Cold War are still being felt and are still quite palpable. Um, this is before the whole like you tear down that wall and all that bullshit. So this is still a thing, and it's still quite, it's something that can be felt and seen probably to different degrees from country to country. So I thought that was kind of interesting too. So my guess is the singer's underscoring this uneasy kind of lack of unity in the continent at the time, or maybe the feeling of that sort of like lack of unity, and the things that he witnessed that only further validate those sentiments. Um, if that is in fact the case, the unease and like the frenetic nature of the music helps underscore and fortify that tension. This lack of solid footing that I felt musically is perhaps what they felt about Europe as they went through its lands and witnessed all these things. So I don't know. You can be like, no, you doofus, you're completely off, or you can be like, no, you're kind of right, but here's this other thing. So I don't know. I'm interested regardless. So please tell me what you know.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for that. As mentioned before, we have covered Simple Minds on the channel 2 years ago. The episode was also a viewer request. Premonition. So I'll put a link to the episode there because I'll go on about the formation of the band, etc. That in detail. So we'll just gloss over that and concentrate on this particular one for this episode. But just to recap, for those who didn't know, very briefly, Simple Minds from Glasgow, Scotland, formed in 1977 as Johnny and the Self-Abusers before becoming Simple Minds. And the band is still active to this day. And they're sort of labelled as post-punk, new wave, and then stadium rock, faux Celtic rock nonsense. Shit. Anyway, let's go on.
I think you really enjoyed that period of their sound.
Personnel at this point, when this is recorded, Charlie Birchall, guitar, he also does saxophone, Derek Forbes, bass guitar, Jim Kerr, vocals, Mick McNeil, keyboards, and Brian McGee, drums. So this is from the album Empires and Dance, the third studio album by Simple Minds, and it was released in September 1980. I did think I had a copy of this, but I don't. So hence a different Simple Minds albums up there. But, it all counts. So just to say, early Simple Minds, they were kind of finding their way at the beginning, and then they became more and more experimental. They were seen as the sort of part of this British post-punk scene, they toured with magazines we spoke about before. They're associated with bands like Echo and the Burning Man, even Joy Division to a certain extent. Um, and Empires and Dance took influence from disco, electronic music by artists such as Donna Summer, Kraftwerk, and Grace Jones, which they heard in German nightclubs. So the beginning of this EDM, as you call it. Um, the album, this album, Empires and Dance, it does include lengthier, structured songs such as "I Travel," as well as a number of more experimental tracks. And Jim Kerr's lyrics are written from the perspective of a character traveling in Central Europe and observing. When it was first released, the album was priced at £3.99, which kind of reminds me of I'm going to get down, but certain albums of that early 80s used to be have a price on them as and Billy Bragg was pay no more than £2.99. And then you see it at the second-hand record shop for 20 quid. Bastards.
Yeah.
And I remember the U2 Under Blood Red Sky was like £3.99, I'm sure, as well. And that was a big part of his success, was it was cheap.
Yeah, it was affordable. Right.
But yeah, it's just real fond memories of this. But yeah, so while Amazon Dance, Empires and Dance did better than its predecessor, Reel to Reel Cacophony, it only reached the dizzying heights of number 41 in the UK albums charts. According to AllMusic, this is primarily because Arista Records only released a small number of copies at a time in little batches and then wait for it to sell out and then release some more, which basically had the effect of limited the availability for fans. So they'll kind of lost enthusiasm off the first or second tranche and not managed to get hold of it. The opening track, I Travel, which you listened to, was released as a single on October 1980 to coincide with the UK tour. And there was a 12-inch release as well, which failed to reach the UK charts, but it gained popularity in the American club scene and was subsequently entered the Billboard Disco chart at number 80 in February 1981. All heady stuff. The album Empires and Dance received enthusiastic reviews in the British music press by contemporary critics. Smash Hits, that well-known purveyor of cultural tastes, gave the album 9 out of 10 rating, praising one of Britain's most gifted and imaginative young bands for moving to a more dance-orientated, synthesizer-dominated style, quotes, without losing any of their melodic instinct or emotional impact. The result has the dance rhythms of disco, the energy of new wave, haunting melodies with fleeting lyrical glimpses of a troubled modern Europe, brackets, but minus the usual modernist posing, a touch of genius at its very human heart. Enemy called this a weird, agitating record. They highlighted I Travel as one of the great disco rock songs. It concluded simple minds have invented their own ways, melodramatic yet modernist, an authentic and new torch music. I'm dancing as fast as I can, and Enemy ranked it at number 19 in their Albums of the Year list. Record Mirror praised Empire Dance as, quote, one of the few classic albums of 1980. They didn't listen to much that year then. And in a retrospective review, AllMusic described Empire Dance as a post-punk dance classic. Trouser Press said that despite its inconsistency, Empires and Dance was an extremely atmospheric and promising album with good dance tunes and a few more quasi-psychedelic ones. And John Fox, who we sort of mentioned with the Ultravox episode, has praised the album and Jim Kerr as a unique lyricist. Now, the album cover you saw from the thumbnail had this sort of faux Cyrillic typeface, which was emulated for the cover of Mount Street Preacher's third album, The Holy Bible, released in 1994. I mentioned that because it remains one of the singer, a guitarist and songwriter James Dean Bradfield's favourite records. He said of Empires and Dance in a 1995 Melody Maker article, I've always liked records which were completely misinformed and displaced. Simple Minds. They were aware that they were Scottish and were trying to shun it. Anyway, that's why they tried to become really European, this dark, unemotive, industrial band. But in a demographic stroke geographic terms, they were really confused. And that can produce brilliant records. I don't think the British look towards Europe in the rose-tinted way Americans do. We see it in a Bazzy faulty-ish terms. I remember reading Jim Kerr going on about the Baader Meinhof gang and the Red Brigade, and trying to make sense of all these conflicting ideologies. On musical terms, it really does make sense. The best bands manifest their lyrics into their music, and it really fucks me off when people don't realize that. There you go. Interesting. Um, I will
It,
say we're
it,
just going to get the lyrics. Well, go on.
I was just gonna say the one thing that I find really interesting is like as I was listening to this, it does it did occur to me that this had more of a mainland Europe sound musically than especially like Germany. When I think of German, the SNL skits in the 80s and 90s used to make like poke fun at sort of their liking this kind of disco tech, early digital music and stuff like that, making a real dent over there and with the popularity and everything. So I thought this was kind of like a not a piss take, but like a doff of the cap to that whole thing since they were going to be discussing that part of Europe. And it sounds to me like, no, this is a sound that they took on in a
They
much
embrace.
larger way than just this song. So that's interesting to learn too, because I just thought it was like a little tongue in cheek, we're writing about Europe, let's make it sound European.
Yeah, I will say this. We'll get into the lyrics in a second. As you mentioned, the first sort of 10, 12 seconds, and probably a little bit longer for me. But my thoughts on this was straight away, you can hear, they mentioned Donna Summer, but Giorgio Moroder, I Feel Love. Do, 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 do,
Yeah.
do, do, do.
Okay.
And if it was like Donna Summer's voice over the top, going, that would fit it perfectly. And then
Gotcha.
when Jim Kerr starts singing, I hear Blancmange living on the ceiling, which again, um, his vocal style is very similar. I think it's of that time because Jim Kerr's vocal style changes. Don't you forget about me, stuff like that. It's
Yeah.
a lot warmer than this, sort of almost disassociated
Yeah.
and clipped new wave type vocals. And again, just sounds like so the two songs, if you merge and mash them together, would be an approximation of this as well. It's very interesting. And obviously, I Feel Love is before then, but the Blancmange is around this time, perhaps a year or two later. But really interesting stuff. You probably wouldn't be familiar with that at all.
No.
He was semi successful in this country. They had a couple of really good. Don't Tell Me is a great song as well. Yeah, really good stuff. Their first album was excellent. Anyway, so there are references in this to other things, and I have not really got. I should have gone through beforehand, and I haven't. But there's things that pop out to me that I think he's referencing as well. Cities are buildings falling down, ideal homes falling down. Those pictures I see on the wall, timeless leaders standing tall, assassin in a hit and run. Asia has a newborn son. Evacuees, refugees, presidents and monarchies. And then the chorus is travel round, decadence and pleasure towns, tragedies, luxuries, statues, parks, galleries. Travel round, decadence and pleasure towns. Europe has a language problem. Talk it on. Talk's another band.
That's
In
right when you
Central
said it
Europe,
for some reason. That's when it hit me. Off talk, talk. That's got to be a
I
reference.
mean, maybe deliberate, it may not, but it just starts picking out at me. In Central Europe, men are marching on marching on now. Love songs playing in the restaurants. Airport playing Brian Eno because he did that, music for airports, the first ever ambient
Oh,
record.
that's interesting. Okay, that
Yeah,
makes sense. And
travel
I
around,
didn't
travel
catch
around.
that word at all because I was like, you said something about an airport, but I don't.
Yeah, yeah. Travel around, decadence and pleasure towns, tragedies, luxuries, statues, parks, galleries. Travel around, decadence and pleasure towns, tragedies, luxuries, statues, parks, galleries. Europe has a language problem. In Central Europe, men are marching. Here's where it gets interesting, because the lyric sheet of the original album included a final verse, which isn't on the song because it stops. However, when they do it on demos or live, they add this extra versa. So the last two bits you hear are Europe has a language problem, Central Europe men are marching. And then it continues. America has a language problem. I travel. Euro Bureau Interpol making love to the criminals. Asia has a language problem. I travel. And on 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 and on. Fade to black. So yeah, really interesting. Yeah, you're talking about that. You remember Berlin Wall was still up, as you say. So Central Europe um, would be, Austria into Germany, I guess, really at that point.
Yeah.
The spine of the wall and the marching around. Language problem. Is it just another way for the sort of the warring nations? Because like for centuries, Europe's just fought each other the whole time. No, the wars are just incredible. So yeah, it just is. It's obviously it's just thoughts as they're going around touring. I don't know how heavily they toured, but yeah, that's as you mentioned, that sort of nightclubby type, almost stereotype we have in our minds of these German guys in their S&M gear and netted wear and all this lot and glow sticks around there and whatever. And but yeah, when you think about it, that the sort of the roots of that is from the sort of krautrock, and then into Kraftwerk and onwards. And Bowie went to Berlin and discovered it, and then they took it on, and it became Euro trash. But yeah, it's all in there. It's really an interesting sound, and it's not particularly a sound that Simple Minds would carry on with for much longer. But they were experimenting and doing different stuff, which is again really interesting and good to hear. I think
Yeah.
their early stuff, I was never a big fan actually, but I got introduced to more of it, listen to it, and you start to pick bits up, and when they hit really good. Well, but yeah, just to finish off on Simple Minds, I think we may have covered this before, but just in case we haven't, they continued on, obviously. In total, 21 studio albums, 11 live albums, and 10 compilations. They have had 24 top 40 singles in the UK, 5 number one albums. They've sold over 60 million albums worldwide. And they were the most commercially successful Scottish band of the 80s.
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds like it. Those numbers will get it done.
Yeah. And he married Patsy Kensit. Yeah. So there you go. Yeah. So that's Simple Minds I Travel. Really interesting track, I think. And as you say, real glimpse into a different aspect of them, which people who are not fans of Simple Minds would not have expected this at all.
Yeah, it was a great shot by Rob, and it kind of opens my eyes further into their sound beyond, for me, what I knew, which is what was on the radio.
Excellent. Yep. Thank you, Rob, for recommending this. Thank you, Andy, for listening to this.
My pleasure.
I'll wrap things up. So, folks out there, tell us what you think. Please do hit the like button if you like this. Drop some comments. We'd love to hear from you. What you think about I Travel and all the other nonsense around that time. Yeah, we're really interested in what you say. If you haven't subscribed already, please do. We do appreciate everybody who does support the channel. And if you've got another suggestion, please do drop it in this or any of the episodes. We'll add it to the list. We will get to the bottom of the list. We'll all be dead by the time we do that, but we will do it. That being said, thanks again so much for watching. And we'll see all of you in the next episode of The Audiophiles.
See you later, guys.